My name is Ashley Landon, and 3 weeks ago, I pushed my stepmother Darla out the front door of the house she pretended to own and locked it behind her. She stood there in her pink slippers, screaming about betrayal, while I held the deed in one hand and my future in the other. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I want to know how far this story reaches. Now let me tell you how it all started. It was 7:02 a.m. when the sharp heel clicks of Darla echoed down the hallway like a countdown. I knew what was coming. My door slammed open, nearly bouncing off the opposite wall, and there she stood, Darla, in her satin robe and sour mood, holding a coffee mug that read Queen of Everything, as if it were a threat. "You're still in bed," she snapped, eyes narrowing like she'd caught me committing a crime. "It's already 7. I told you last night, my book club's coming early. You need to make the eggs and iron the tablecloth." I didn't even lift my head. "It's not my job." Without warning, she strode to the edge of my bed and yanked the blanket off with one swift motion. "Get up and make me breakfast, now." I sat up so fast the hoodie I'd slept in nearly strangled me. My heart was already pounding, and the room's cold air hit like a slap, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of fear. "You're not my mother," I snapped. My voice cracked, but not from weakness. From years of swallowing words I should have screamed. "Oh, don't start with that again," she muttered, already walking out. I threw on jeans and stomped down the stairs just as Bill, my father, shuffled into the kitchen, still in socks and a blank expression. The morning sun lit up the dust floating in the air like some divine spotlight, exposing just how miserable everything really was. "She's just being her usual self," he muttered, pouring coffee with hands that shook slightly. "She treats me like the maid," I shot back, yanking open the fridge. He didn't even look up. "Just do what she says, Ash, it's not worth the fight." That line again. I slammed the fridge door so hard the magnet calendar fell off. "You always say that. And you always push," he said softly, still not meeting my eyes. The eggs sizzled in the pan while Darla barked instructions about folding napkins and cutting fruit diagonally, like I was being trained to serve her royal court. Her friends would be arriving soon, loud, wine at 9 a.m. women who treated our house like a clubhouse and me like a prop. As I stood at the stove, spatula trembling in my hand, I felt it, the familiar coil of resentment tightening in my chest. And under it something newer. Stronger. Resolve. Because no one else seemed to remember, but I did. This house didn't belong to Darla. Not really. And one day soon, neither would anything inside it. For now, I let the eggs burn a little. Just enough to make her morning start as bitter as mine. As she screeched about ruined yolks and stomped off to redo her makeup for the 5th time, I walked upstairs slowly, one foot dragging after the other, counting the steps like it might save me. At the top of the stairs, I paused. Just for a second. And then I slammed my bedroom door so hard the frame rattled. Let her hear it. Let them both hear it. Let the house remember who it really belongs to. It was late afternoon when I finally crawled back out of my cave of a room, still half-wrapped in the oversized hoodie I hadn't changed out of. The morning had scraped something raw in me, but by then, the day had gone quiet. Darla was off somewhere with her shrill friends, probably drinking overpriced coffee and loudly pretending to be someone important. The house was still. I found my dad, Bill, in the living room, sunk into the couch like part of the furniture, the newspaper stretched out like a shield between us. Sports section on one side, world disasters on the other. He flipped a page. I stood in the doorway with a basket of clean laundry balanced on my hip. I hadn't meant to speak, really, I hadn't, but the words just came out, too heavy to hold anymore. "Why do you let her talk to me like that?" The paper didn't move. He licked his thumb and turned another page. "Dad." Finally, the paper came down. His eyes met mine briefly, just briefly, and I saw it again. That same tired avoidance. The same blank surrender that had defined every conversation since the day Darla moved in 6 years ago. "She's just trying her best, Ash," I scoffed. "Trying her best, she treats me like a stray dog, like I'm some leftover project she didn't sign up for." He sighed, not in defense, just in discomfort. "You just need to endure a bit longer." My fingers clenched around the edge of the laundry basket. "That's your answer to everything. It's not forever. You're almost done with school, then you can go off and have your own life. She'll be out of your hair." I blinked at him, stunned. "So the plan is to wait until I leave." "It's not ideal," he admitted, folding the paper in half with excruciating care. "But it's easier this way." "Easier for who?" I asked, voice low. He didn't answer. "He didn't have to," I turned and walked away before I said something I couldn't take back. Something like you were supposed to protect me. Back in my room, I dumped the basket on the floor and sat down beside it, knees to my chest. For a long time, I just sat there in the dull glow of the setting sun bleeding through the blinds. I picked up one of my favorite t-shirts and folded it slowly. Mechanical. Like folding my own grief. When I was little, this room had been a place of warmth. Grandma made the curtains when I was 10, faded blue with stitched edges. There were still tiny flower pins stuck into the corkboard she'd given me for my drawings. She used to call this house the nest. Her safe little nest. Now it felt like a cage someone else had moved into. I picked up another shirt. Folded, stacked. Endure a bit longer, he said, as if I hadn't already endured enough. As if every slammed door, every backhanded comment, every empty birthday, every whisper of not her real mother wasn't enough already. I folded socks next. Then pajamas. Then a dress I hadn't worn since Grandma's funeral. I paused at that one. My grandmother's voice still lived in this house. In the corners, in the cabinets. Sometimes when I walked down the hallway I could hear her. You're my strong girl, Ash, you always see through people. But lately I didn't feel strong. I felt tired, like a visitor in my own life. By the time I finished folding, the light outside had shifted to that deep, golden hue that made everything seem almost kind. Almost. I looked at the neatly folded piles of clothes on my bed and felt nothing. Not pride, not comfort, just that blank, stretching numbness that came after years of biting my tongue until it bruised. That's when I whispered it. I miss you. No one heard, not really. But the silence answered back with something close to understanding. I opened my nightstand drawer and pulled out an old photo. The one of me and Grandma baking cookies in this very kitchen, her arms wrapped around me, both of us laughing. I'd been 9. She'd loved this house. Fought to keep it. Paid the mortgage herself when Dad's job went under. She never said it out loud, but I knew she meant for this place to stay in the family. For me. Now Darla was roofholstering the dining chairs and talking about painting the walls, sage gray, like it was hers to claim. I tucked the photo under my pillow and lay back. I couldn't stop what Darla said. I couldn't force my dad to grow a spine, but I could remember. And remembering, especially when no one else did, was a kind of power. The backyard smelled like vanilla candles and overwatered grass. I had strung the fairy lights myself, zip-tying them to the sagging wooden fence that Grandma once painted robin's egg blue. Some had flickered out. I didn't mind, it gave the yard a kind of wobbly charm. I'd spent all afternoon making cupcakes from scratch, lemon poppy seed with cream cheese frosting, Grandma's recipe. Trish said it was the only birthday flavor I ever baked, and she wasn't wrong. It felt like something stable, something safe. Dad brought out the Bluetooth speaker. I had queued up a playlist of mellow indie songs, soft, humming tunes that wouldn't offend Darla's refined palate. Not that she came out to help. Just as the sun dipped below the rooftops, my guests started to trickle in. 3 from school, 1 girl from work. Trish, thankfully, she was late as usual, but when I saw her red Jeep pull up to the curb I exhaled for the first time that day. Hey, birthday Phoenix, she grinned, carrying 2 pink gift bags and a 6-pack of lemonade. Still rising from the ashes, something like that. We set the drinks on the table and sat on the patio. The sky turned indigo as laughter picked up, small and kind. For a second the air felt light. Then the back door creaked open. Darla stepped out like she was inspecting the aftermath of a minor storm. Robe on, wine glass in hand. She scanned the crowd like she didn't recognize any of them, and to be fair, she didn't care to. She walked right past me and stopped near the cupcake table. Is this it? She asked loudly. This is the big birthday bash. I felt the smiles around me go stiff. One girl looked down at her phone. Well, Darla sighed, I guess when no one RSVPs you get this kind of crowd. Trish's eyes flashed. We RSVP'd, she said coolly. We just weren't invited through you. Darla's eyes narrowed, then swept over Trish like she was made of lint. Oh, she said with a smile too wide. You're the cousin, the one who still lives with her mom. Trish raised an eyebrow. That a problem? No, Darla chuckled. Just, explains the outfit. My stomach dropped. I looked around, watching the invisible thread that had held this party together snap one by one. By the time Darla called one of my classmates, a quiet girl named Lena, a little wallpaper ghost, the damage was done. First the girl from work left, then the classmate, then the second. It was like watching sand fall through my fingers. Within 20 minutes, only Trish remained, leaning against the fence with her arms crossed. She gets off on this, she said flatly. It's like theater for her. She humiliated Lena, I whispered. She wanted to humiliate you, Trish replied. They just got caught in the crossfire. The remaining cupcakes sat untouched. The string lights buzzed overhead like a whisper of apology. When Trish finally left with a long hug and a muttered, "You deserve better," I stood alone in the yard with 2 balloons swaying half-heartedly in the breeze and half a cake melting in the evening warmth. I cleaned up slowly, quietly, like trying not to wake a house that didn't love me back. The kitchen was empty when I came in. The clock above the stove read 10:42. The party had lasted just over 2 hours. Darla was already seated at the breakfast nook with a glass of boxed wine and a smug little smirk. Bill sat beside her, staring into a plate of scrambled eggs like they might tell his future. "Well," she laughed, swirling her drink, "your little party was a total train wreck." I didn't respond right away. I placed the leftover cake on the counter, set the used paper plates by the trash, and turned to face them. "It was important to me," I said softly. She blinked, mock surprise lighting her face. "Oh, sweetheart, if that was important, you really need to raise your standards." Bill didn't look up. He just quietly cut into his eggs, chewing like a man afraid to taste anything. I stared at the 2 of them, her biting into crackers like she owned this house, him shrinking into himself like maybe he didn't. There were things I wanted to say, things I rehearsed in my head every night, but instead I picked up a fork and ate a piece of cake, right there at the kitchen counter, refusing to let her have the last word. It tasted like lemon and salt. The morning after the disaster of my so-called birthday party, the house was eerily still. Darla had gone to one of her endless luncheons, and Bill was out front mowing the lawn like trimming the edges could fix the cracks underneath. I didn't want to be there. Not in the house, not in that silence, not with the lingering echo of her voice in the kitchen laughing about my failure like it was a punchline. So I left. No destination, no coat. Just my hoodie, sneakers, and the kind of emptiness that made my chest feel too big for my body. I wandered through the neighborhood like a ghost in daylight. The maple trees lining the sidewalks were dripping gold and red, the kind of Kansas fall my grandma used to call story weather. Crisp, vivid, and lonely. My feet led me nowhere, past the gas station, past the elementary school where I'd once played tetherball until my palms blistered, past the bakery that used to smell like heaven before it shut down. And then I heard it. "Ash," I turned around. Trish stood on the corner outside Bean and Bloom Cafe, a paper cup in one hand, car keys in the other, eyes squinting in the sunlight. Her auburn hair was tucked under a beanie, and she wore a denim jacket covered in enamel pins, tiny rainbows, sunflowers, a cat flipping the bird. "You good?" she asked, walking toward me. I tried to smile, but it didn't make it to my eyes. "You look like you just came from a funeral," she said gently. "Come on, sit with me." She guided me inside the cafe like I might blow away in the breeze. We took a booth near the back, by the window that faced the alley. It was quiet there, a little cocoon of warmth and espresso. Trish slid her untouched coffee toward me and stood. "You like oat milk, right?" I nodded. She returned minutes later with a second drink, mine this time, and slid into the booth across from me. I sipped. It burned, but in a good way, like waking up. She didn't press. Just sat with me, fiddling with the sleeve of her jacket until I finally said it. She humiliated me, in front of everyone, at my own birthday. "I know," Trish murmured. She made fun of the guests, laughed at me when they left, told me it was a train wreck, like I hadn't spent all day trying to make it nice. Trish tilted her head. "You shouldn't have to try that hard for the people in your own home to be decent." "It's not my home," I said bitterly. "It's hers." She stared at me like I'd just said the sky was green. "Ash, what are you talking about?" I shrugged. "She's the one calling the shots, remodeling everything, making the rules. Dad just lets her." Trish leaned in, her voice dropped. "Ashley, that house is yours." I blinked. "What?" Her brows furrowed. "Are you serious? You really don't remember?" My chest tightened. "Remember what?" She looked around and lowered her voice even more. "Grandma left the house to you, in her will." "No," I said slowly, trying to make the memory match the words. "She said it would stay in the family, that it would always be my home, but that was just something she said to make me feel better." "No," Trish repeated firmly. "She put it in writing. I was there when the lawyer read the will. I remember the exact words. The home at 238 East Redwood shall pass solely to my granddaughter Ashley Landon, to be held in her name upon reaching 18 years of age. That's what it said. My stomach dropped. That can't be right, Dad never said anything. Trish gave a dry laugh. Well, yeah, because it doesn't benefit him to say anything, especially not now that Darla's turned your life into her little kingdom. But it's not like I've seen any documents, there's no deed, no proof. Have you ever looked? She asked gently. I opened my mouth, closed it. The truth was I hadn't. The idea that the house might actually be mine, legally mine, felt too big to hold. My heart raced just thinking about it. I pressed a hand against my chest, like that would slow it down. Trish reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Grandma would never have let this happen, she said. Not if she were alive, she knew what Darla was, that's why she left it to you. My voice came out a whisper. I'd forgotten that. Trish nodded slowly. Well, maybe it's time to remember. Outside the window, the wind picked up, scattering red leaves across the alley like tiny flags in a revolution. The sky had already shifted to navy when I stepped out of the house that night, a bundle of fresh peonies wrapped in brown paper clutched in my arms like a secret. I didn't tell Dad where I was going. He was in the living room, watching something loud and pointless on TV, the glow of the screen flickering across his glasses. I doubt he would have noticed if I'd said anything anyway. As for Darla, her laughter echoed down the hallway as she talked on speakerphone with someone she called Babe. Not my business. Not anymore. The sidewalk was cold under my sneakers, the air sharp enough to make me zip my hoodie all the way up. Autumn in Kansas always felt like a turning point, like the world was catching its breath between heat and frost. The smell of chimney smoke drifted through the air as I passed familiar houses, their windows lit in gold, families tucked inside. I used to imagine being in those houses when I was little, pretending I belonged to one of them just for a minute, somewhere safe, somewhere warm, where no one made me feel like I had to earn my place at the table. The cemetery wasn't far, just past the old train tracks and down a gravel path that wound between sugar maples and crumbling stone angels. I found her headstone easily. I always did. Beatrice A. Landon, beloved mother, grandmother, gardener of all things good. The stone was simple, just like her. No marble angels, no pretentious quotes, just her name and the truth of who she was. I knelt down and set the peonies at the base, unwrapping the paper gently like I didn't want to startle her. Hi, Grandma, I whispered, brushing fallen leaves off the stone. My fingers shook, but not from the cold. I brought your favorite peonies. The market had them today, almost like they knew I needed them. The night air wrapped around me like a coat made of silence. I forgot, I admitted. I forgot what you said about the house, about it being mine. My voice cracked on the last word. I cleared my throat and tried again. I thought I was going crazy. I let her convince me I didn't belong, that this house, your house, could belong to someone like Darla. I shook my head, tears burning behind my eyes. I forgot you saw me. When no one else ever did. The ground was cold beneath my knees, but I didn't move. I'm sorry I let her take over. I didn't know I was allowed to fight back. It always felt like if I pushed too hard, something would break. And maybe it will, but maybe that's okay. The stars were peeking out now, faint and flickering, like Grandma's Christmas lights that used to hang year-round on the porch just because I liked them. I miss you, I said softly. Every day. I miss how you used to hum while you cooked. I miss how you'd braid my hair so gently I'd fall asleep in the chair. I miss how safe your arms felt. Even when the rest of the house was chaos, you made it feel like home. I placed my hand flat on the cool stone. I just wanted someone to say they were proud of me. A breeze swept through the cemetery, rustling the trees like a whisper. In my mind, I heard her voice again. You're my strong girl, Ash. You always see through people. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I didn't feel like a burden or an afterthought or a problem to be managed. I felt like me, Ashley Landon, granddaughter of Beatrice, the girl who knew how to make the perfect lemon frosting, who remembered every story ever told to her, who used to fall asleep on the living room rug because she felt safe enough to. That girl was still here, buried under years of being dismissed, but not gone, not gone. I tilted my face toward the sky. The stars blinked above, scattered and stubborn, refusing to disappear, just like me. When I stood, my knees ached, but my spine didn't bend. I left the peonies at the grave and walked back through the cemetery, the leaves crunching underfoot like quiet applause. Tonight, I remembered. and tomorrow I'd find proof. The clock on my nightstand flashed 12:21 a.m. I lay flat on my back, eyes wide open, heart still settled somewhere back at the cemetery. That strange calm I'd felt near Grandma's grave was dissolving bit by bit, eaten away by the chaos trickling under my bedroom door. Laughter, glass clinking, the thud of someone knocking over furniture and not caring to fix it. The living room was alive, full of shrieking voices and the familiar sound of Darla's signature bark laugh cutting through it all. A wine-fueled pack of hyenas in heels. She'd brought them over without asking again. A group of women from her yoga class, I guessed. They always wore top knots and lip gloss that smelled like peppermint schnapps. I'd overheard them once calling me the house girl. Not even stepdaughter, just house girl. I pressed my palms to my eyes and told myself to let it go. Just one more loud night. I could find the deed soon. I could make moves. But then another shriek pierced through the wall, followed by a high-pitched chant of shots, shots, shots. Someone screamed with laughter. A glass shattered. And something inside me tipped. I sat up, pulled my sweatshirt over my tank top, and padded down the hallway in my pajama pants and socks, heart hammering like I was about to do something rebellious and wild, instead of ask for basic respect in my own home. The house reeked of white wine and burnt cheese. The TV blasted music videos, while Darla's crew lounged around the living room like they owned the place. One on the coffee table, another wrapped in my dad's old fleece blanket with her bare feet on the wall. I stood there for a beat too long, unnoticed. Invisible, again, then I cleared my throat. "Excuse me." 3 heads turned. One woman blinked at me like I was part of the furniture that had suddenly spoken. "Could you please keep it down?" I asked, voice steady. "It's past midnight." Darla turned toward me slowly, wine glass in hand, lips painted the color of dried blood. She smiled, the kind of smile you feel in your spine. "Oh look," she drawled. "Sleeping Beauty's up." I didn't respond. "I must have been yelling too loud during your little pity party yesterday," she went on, her tone syrupy. "Guess you're still sensitive." One of the women snorted. Another whispered something behind her palm and they both giggled. I tightened my hands into fists inside my sleeves. "I'm asking nicely, just, please lower the volume." Darla stood. She crossed the room in 2 slow, deliberate steps and stopped just in front of me. She wasn't tall, but in heels and hatred, she felt like she towered. "You live under my roof," she said, each word sharp and clean. "You don't get to tell me how loud I can laugh in my own living room." "It's not your—" The slap came out of nowhere. Quick, hard, stinging, a gasp from one of her friends. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," but no one moved. I didn't cry, I didn't even flinch. But I felt the burn spread across my cheek like fire blooming under skin. Darla tilted her head, still smiling. "Next time you want to play grown-up, try buying your own house first." Then she turned back to her guests and raised her glass. To thin walls and even thinner skin. They erupted into laughter. I backed away, legs like rubber. My vision tunneled. I turned and fled down the hallway, not bothering to close the door behind me. Inside my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. Not from fear, from fury, from shame. I touched my cheek where her hand had landed. My skin pulsed there, a physical mark for the invisible ones she'd been leaving for years. This time, it wasn't just a comment or a smirk. It wasn't just another party I wasn't invited to. It was a line, crossed, and I wasn't going to let her pretend it didn't happen. Not anymore. The slap had faded into a dull warmth by morning, but the memory of it burned hotter than ever. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, eyes swollen, cheek flushed, hoodie wrinkled from a sleepless night. My lips were chapped, my hair a mess, but my jaw it was set. Something had shifted. It wasn't rage, I'd known that before. Rage flared fast and died faster. This was resolve. I brushed my hair back and nodded to the girl in the mirror. "You're not furniture, you're not invisible, and this is still your house." I went back to my room, dug through the drawer where I kept my files, and pulled out the slim, crisp envelope Trish had delivered to me later that night after our coffee. She dropped it off with a single word. Proof. Inside were photocopies of Grandma's will, notarized, dated, official. Highlighted in yellow was the line that changed everything. "The home at 238 East Redwood shall pass solely to my granddaughter, Ashley Landon." My name. In ink. I stared at it for a full minute, heart thumping like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. Then I grabbed my phone and searched for a realtor. It took 3 calls to find one who wasn't booked solid, but when Carla answered, crisp, no nonsense, and somehow warm, I knew she was the one. Hi, this is Carla Mendez, she said. How can I help you today? There was a beat before I spoke. I wasn't used to asking for things. I'm ready to list the house, I said. My voice cracked slightly, but I didn't back down. I inherited it. I have the documents. It's mine and I want it sold. A pause on her end. Okay, she said slowly, then with growing energy. Okay, let's set up a walkthrough. I'll bring the paperwork and we'll go from there. We scheduled for 3 that afternoon. By 2:55, I had vacuumed every corner, shoved Darla's junk into her closet, and wiped down the kitchen counters until they gleamed like armor. At exactly 3:00, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Carla standing there, early 40s, dark blazer, sleek bob, clipboard in hand and eyes that scanned everything like she was already evaluating it. Ashley, she asked. I nodded, she smiled. Let's make some magic. I stepped aside and let her in. She moved through the house with purpose, making notes, murmuring about square footage, lighting, and potential charm under the clutter. I followed beside her, explaining what had been updated, what hadn't, and which window frames still squeaked when it stormed. She paused at the fireplace, tapping her pen against her lip. This place has good bones, she said. People are going to see that. The moment felt surreal. This was the same living room where Darla had laughed at my birthday cake, where she'd called me pathetic. Now it was being sized up for showings, photographed like something worth valuing. We were halfway through the tour, midway up the stairs, when it happened. A door creaked open down the hall. Darla, hair in a messy knot, robe slipping off one shoulder, mascara smudged under her eyes like bruises she didn't earn, she froze at the sight of us. What is this? 3 words, sharp enough to pierce drywall. Carla blinked, caught mid-sentence. I turned to Darla slowly, heartbeat steady, and said it plainly. My property, that's what this is. Darla stepped forward, face twisting. You don't make decisions like this without telling me. You don't get to drag strangers into this house. I don't need your permission, I said calmly. I have the deed, I have the will, this house is mine. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked between me and Carla, unsure where to land her fire. I'm calling your father. Call whoever you want. I turned back to Carla. We'll finish the upstairs now. Carla glanced at Darla, then at me, and gave a small approving nod. Lead the way. We walked past Darla like she was furniture. And for once, she was the one standing still, stunned, as the house moved on without her. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. After Carla left, I stayed in my room, half expecting Darla to charge in with some dramatic threat or a barrage of wine-fueled insults. But she didn't. Instead, there was a long stretch of silence, until I heard the garage door open. Then close, muffled voices. No, just one voice, Darla. I crept to the top of the stairs and stood just out of sight, leaning slightly toward the vent that led down to the garage. Her voice floated up like smoke, sharp, frantic, desperate. She brought a realtor here, Bill, a realtor. A stranger walking through my kitchen, my bathroom, like I'm some tenant in a rental. She didn't even ask. There was a pause, then the scrape of something, probably his boot on the concrete floor. I don't understand what you want me to do about it, he said, his voice low and tired. Stop her, Darla snapped. Tell her she can't just sell the house like it's hers. She's just a kid, Bill. She's playing dress up with power she doesn't have. She's 20, he said quietly. She's not a kid anymore. Darla let out a bitter laugh. So you're just going to sit there while she destroys everything. I've put in years here, years, and now she thinks she can erase me like I'm a smudge on her pretty little picture. You knew it was Beatrice's house, he replied. You always knew that. That doesn't mean she gets to push me out. Another pause, long this time, the kind that means more than words ever could. Go talk to her, Darla finally said, her tone tight. Make her stop. The door slammed. I ducked back down the hall and slipped inside my room, heart pounding. I didn't sit, I didn't move. I waited. Sure enough, 5 minutes later there was a knock. Dad stepped inside, still in his garage jacket, the smell of sawdust and motor oil clinging to him like a second skin. He shut the door behind him and leaned against it, his hands buried in his pockets. What are you doing, Ash? He asked softly. I met his eyes, no flinching, no shrinking. I'm selling what's mine. He blinked like the words had physically hit him. You can't just do that. I can, I said, and I am. Grandma left the house to me, Dad. Not you, not Darla, me, I have the will. Carla's already started the paperwork. He rubbed a hand across his jaw, his eyes scanning the floor like maybe the answers were hidden in the carpet. She didn't mean for it to go this way, he said. No, I agreed. She meant for this house to be mine because she knew how this would go if it wasn't. His gaze shot back to me. She wouldn't want you to throw us out. She wouldn't want me to live like this. Humiliated. Ignored hit. That word hung in the air like a stone dropped into water. Hit, he looked stricken. She hit you, I said nothing. He stared at me a long time, then pulled out his phone and walked toward the window. I need to call Gerald, he said. Your grandma's attorney. I watched as he dialed with shaking fingers, held the phone to his ear and said quietly, Hey Gerald, it's Bill. I need to ask you something about Beatrice's will. There was silence on my end. Just the sound of his breath, ragged. His hand trembling slightly. Then finally he said the words. You're sure, no doubt, a longer pause. Right, thanks. He hung up, turned to me, his face looked hollow. Older, it's true, he whispered, it's all yours. We stood there in silence, the weight of it settling between us like fresh snow. Neither of us moved, neither of us spoke. For once, he didn't tell me to endure. The next morning, sunlight poured into the kitchen like it had forgotten what kind of house it was lighting up. I stood at the counter, slicing strawberries with deliberate calm, the scent sweet and sharp in the quiet. The deed sat folded neatly in my pocket, though I didn't need it anymore. I'd memorized every line. Behind me, footsteps clicked softly across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn. Ashley, Darla's voice cooed, syrupy sweet, like it had been dipped in honey and guilt. I kept slicing. She came closer, slow, almost cautious. Her robe was tied tighter than usual, her lipstick barely there. A performance of vulnerability. Sweetheart, she said again, resting one hand lightly on the back of the chair. I think we both know this has gone a little too far. I mean, listing the house, that's not necessary. I set the knife down and turned to her, calm, unblinking. I have a showing in 2 hours, I said. Please clear the clutter. Her mouth twitched, but she didn't break. Not yet. You know we've had our differences, she tried again, voice softer now, like I was some frightened cat she was trying to coax back. But I've always treated you like my own. I stared at her for a moment, then simply said, No, you haven't. Her lips parted like she might object, but the silence between us was too thick to push through. I walked past her and headed toward the hallway closet, pulling out the vacuum. I'd like the floors to be clean before the buyers arrive, I said over my shoulder. They'll be here at 11. And that was it, no fight, no shouting, just clarity. By the time 11 rolled around, the house looked better than it had in years. The windows gleamed, the cushions were fluffed. The lemon cupcakes cooling on the counter filled the room with a sense of welcome I hadn't felt since Grandma was alive. Carla arrived first, clipboard in hand and blazer pressed crisp as ever. Looks fantastic, she said, surveying the living room. You ready? I nodded once. More than ready. The first couple showed up 10 minutes later. A young pair with a baby on the way, full of questions and curiosity. I walked them through the house with quiet confidence, pointing out the original hardwood floors and the way the sunlight hit just right in the afternoon. Darla sat in the corner, wrapped in a throw blanket like a sad movie extra, dabbing fake tears with a tissue and making soft sniffles every few minutes. Her eyes followed me like a ghost in a gothic novel, waiting for someone to ask her why she looked so tragic. No one did. The second visitor, a woman in her 50s with paint swatches tucked into her purse, barely glanced in Darla's direction. She asked about property taxes, roof age, and how many owners the house had had. Just one, I said. My grandmother, then me. Darla made a soft, choking sound, but Carla stepped in smoothly. And Ashley has all the ownership paperwork ready to go. We moved through the bedrooms, the hallway, the backyard. Each room felt more mine with every passing minute. By the end of the second showing, I could feel it. The house was shedding its old skin. Every step I took scrubbed away the years I spent folding laundry in silence and swallowing words that bruised on the way down. When the door finally closed behind the last buyer, I stood in the foyer with Carla, the smell of cupcakes lingering like a memory that chose to stay. You handled that like a pro, she said. I smiled, small but real. I've been waiting a long time to be heard. The sunset lit the sky like fire behind the trees, casting long gold lines across the floorboards of the hallway. It was that hour of day when everything looks almost too beautiful, like the calm just before a storm that knows it's overdue. I stood by the front door, flipping through Carla's notes on the showings. Both buyers had seemed serious. Either offer could change everything. I should have felt nervous. I didn't. I felt clear. The sound of heavy footsteps came from behind Bill, moving with purpose for once in his life. I turned to see him standing there in his worn boots and work jacket, hands clenched like he'd made up his mind about something and was scared to death to say it. He looked from me to the dining room. Darla stood at the table, swirling wine in a glass she hadn't asked to open, talking loudly on the phone about how hard it is to live with people who lack gratitude. As if on cue, she hung up and turned toward us with that smirk she wore like war paint. "Well, the circus is quiet now," she said. "Any more strangers coming through today, or are we safe to walk through the living room without an audience?" Her voice was sharp but bored, like she was still pretending she had control. Bill inhaled deeply, then exhaled. And then the impossible. "Enough is enough, Darla," he said. Silence. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pause. Darla blinked, stunned by the sound of her husband growing a spine in real time. "I said," he repeated, louder now, "enough." Darla tilted her head and let out a laugh, harsh and high-pitched. "You," she said, "you're telling me what's enough now, that's rich." She turned to me. "Let me guess, you put him up to this," whispered in his ear between cupcakes and your little open house parade. "No," I said quietly. "He figured it out on his own." Darla took a slow sip of wine, dragging her gaze across the room like she was still queen of it all. "Bill, you want to do this now? Throw away everything we've built together. For what, this little rebellion? You really think she's going to take care of you the way I did?" "I think," he said carefully, "that you stopped caring about either of us a long time ago." She scoffed, flinging the rest of her wine into the sink with a clatter. "You're both unbelievable," she snapped. "You think you can just erase me. Like I didn't hold this place together while you two sat around feeling sorry for yourselves." I stepped forward, slow, calm, steady. I walked to the front door, opened it wide, and let the evening breeze drift in. Cool and clean, I looked at her. "This is no longer your home." Darla froze. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said, still quiet. "No yelling. It's done, you don't live here anymore." She turned to Bill like she expected him to laugh. He didn't. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice starting to fray. "You can't just throw me out," but I didn't wait for her to finish. I walked up to her, took the wine glass from her hand, set it on the counter and placed my hand gently, deliberately on her arm. "You need to leave." She tried to pull back, but not fast enough. With one firm motion, I guided her toward the door. She stumbled once in shock, heels catching on the rug. When she reached the threshold, she twisted toward Bill again, desperation flashing across her face. "You're really letting her do this?" He didn't answer. And that silence, that was the final blow. I stepped forward and pushed the door closed. Not slammed. Just shut, clean, final. Through the glass, I watched her stand on the porch, stunned, robe flapping in the breeze like she didn't know how she'd gotten there. I didn't turn away until she did. When I locked the door with steady hands, my dad still hadn't moved. But he was watching me, really watching me. And I think, for the first time since Grandma died, he finally saw who I was. Not the house girl, not the problem, the owner. The porch light buzzed softly overhead, casting a pale glow across the front steps as Darla spun around, her face twisted in fury. "You ungrateful little brat," she screamed, voice cracking. "This house was nothing before I came into it. You think you're in control now, you don't know the first thing about what it takes to run a home." She pounded on the door once. Twice, the glass shook but I didn't flinch. From behind me, Bill stood still in the hall, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't move to stop her, just stood there, small in the doorway, like he was finally letting go of something he should have released years ago. "You'll regret this," Darla shouted, fists clenched at her sides. "Both of you." I looked her in the eye through the glass, calm, unblinking, and slowly reached for the deadbolt. My fingers trembled, but they didn't hesitate. The lock clicked. "Final." Darla's voice rose again outside, a string of words too bitter to be worth holding on to. But as the porch light flickered and settled, she realized no one was listening anymore. I backed away from the door, breath shaky in my chest. Behind me, Bill let out a long exhale, more like a collapse in slow motion. He rubbed a hand over his face, then looked at me, not as a child, not as a burden, but like he was finally catching up to where I'd been standing all along. "It's about time," he murmured, voice hoarse. "Someone did what I couldn't." I nodded once, tears stinging but refusing to fall. "I'm not letting this house be a place of cruelty anymore," I whispered. "Not while I'm in it." Outside, Darla's voice faded into silence, swallowed by the wind and the night. Inside, the house breathed. For the first time in months, it was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that presses down like shame, but the kind that lets you exhale. Peaceful, safe, hours. The knock came just after 9 the next morning. A weak, polite little tap, not the rage-fueled pounding from the night before. I didn't rush to answer. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, flipping pancakes for the first time in months without feeling like I had to hurry or justify my existence. The silence wasn't hollow anymore. It was mine. Another soft knock. I let the second pancake bubble fully before I turned off the burner and walked slowly to the front door. When I opened it, there she was, Darla, hair brushed, lips bare, clothes wrinkled like she hadn't slept. In her hands, a small floral tote and her favorite throw blanket. She didn't look like herself. She looked like someone trying to become someone else quickly. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, said nothing. I just swallowed hard. I didn't think you'd actually do it. I noticed. Her lips pressed together. "Ashley, I know I've said things, done things that were not kind." I tilted my head. "Not kind." That was her version of an apology. She clutched the strap of her tote tighter. "But I've also made mistakes, and I'm trying to be better about owning that." I didn't speak. I let the weight of silence stretch until she filled it. "I'll leave," she said. "I will. I just need a few days to figure out where to go. I won't get in your way. I'll stay in the basement or the garage if I have to. You won't even notice me." There was a time not long ago when I would have said yes, when my automatic response would have been to make space for other people's comfort at the cost of my own. But not now, not after everything. "You're not staying," I said gently, "but I'm not selling any more either." That made her blink. "You're not," I shook my head. "This house isn't just bricks and windows, it's roots, it's memory. It's what my grandmother built so I'd always have a place where I didn't have to earn love to deserve peace." She looked at me like she didn't understand the language I was speaking. "I've decided to keep it," I said, "but I'm keeping it for me." A breeze moved through the porch, lifting her hair and carrying with it the faint scent of lavender from the peonies I'd put in a vase by the window. Darla nodded once, slow and unsure. Then she stepped back. "I'll have my things out by tonight." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat, I just said, "Take care of yourself." And closed the door, not with force, just with finality. I stood in the hallway for a long moment after, hand still on the doorknob, heart steady. Then I turned and walked back toward the kitchen where the smell of pancakes lingered and the sunlight through the curtains looked like hope. Things were going to be different now, because I said so. The kitchen smells like lemon zest and warm vanilla, Grandma's signature scent, resurrected by my own hands. It's been 3 months since Darla left. 3 quiet, steady months that feel like I've been stitching my life back together one sunrise at a time. The walls are no longer beige and cold. I painted them a soft blue, like the inside of a robin's egg. Trish helped, of course. She brought over bagels and a playlist, and we laughed until the rollers slipped from our hands. That was the first day I felt like the house belonged to me, not just on paper, but in spirit. Living rooms filled with mismatched chairs and colorful mugs now. I started a little home bakery, nothing fancy, just cupcakes and cookies and warmth. Neighbors come by for orders and stay for stories. Kids sit on the porch swing, and sometimes I even hear music again. My rules are simple: kindness first, shoes off, and no one raises their voice unless it's in joy. Even Dad stops by sometimes. He doesn't say much, but he stays longer each time. He brought me a new stand mixer last week. Didn't say why, didn't have to. Once a month, I walk to the cemetery with a fresh bouquet of peonies. I kneel beside Grandma's stone and tell her what I've built. I tell her the oven's temperamental, that the lemon glaze still gives me trouble, and that I never let anyone talk over me anymore. I used to think silence was strength. Now I know it's boundaries that keep the peace alive. And finally, I am home. That was the end of my story. But one thing still stays with me. My dad knew Darla was mistreating me for years, and yet he chose silence. Until the very end, when he finally stood beside me. Did he do the right thing by waiting so long to act, or was that moment too little, too late? Tell me in the comments. I really want to know what you think. And if my journey meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that hit close to home.